Welcome everyone. This is Andrew Dailey of MGI, and this is a SaaS CFO's perspective on revenue recognition. Every business is becoming a software business, with more and more companies adopting as-a-service business models. The sales, finance, and operational infrastructure necessary to support that mix of products and services, digital, physical, hybrid, that infrastructure really increases in complexity. In the finance function, revenue accounting, as we all learned through the process of going through ASC 606, really can no longer be done through the use of Excel and adding headcount. The only way to scale the finance team today is really through automation. We've had a number of sessions on RevRec, and to provide a CFO's point of view on the practical challenges of revenue accounting and trying to scale a finance team, I'm now joined by Brad Sawaya, who's the CFO of BillingPlatform. Welcome, Brad, to the Monetize Forum.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, first time at the forum. I like it. So you've worked inside the finance function of a very large enterprise with one of the most famous finance functions, little two-letter company, GE, as well as within hardware and software companies of different sizes. So let's just start, in your experience, what are the common challenges when it comes to revenue recognition?
Sure. When I think of areas that companies struggle with around RevRec, I like to think about them in three different areas: timing, attribution, and accounting. The first challenge is how to record revenue, the right amount of revenue in the right accounting period. Virtually all organizations struggle with this. For SaaS companies that are looking to scale, they're trying to figure out how to automate the accounting timing as their product and different offerings increase in complexity and as their business matures. The problem is finding a scalable solution. They're trying to figure out how to keep the wheels from coming off the cart. For traditional companies, that timing piece hasn't always been a problem. When you're selling widgets, the revenue accounting is relatively straightforward. But now, like you said, more than ever, you're seeing these traditional companies that are introducing recurring revenue streams. These new offerings require a different approach to RevRec. So when you introduce them as a subscription or a usage-based deal into an environment that's been built for selling widgets, the system cannot automate the new offerings. That's their problem. The second problem is around revenue attribution. Once you know what amount to recognize in what accounting period, the next question is who gets credit? Any enterprise with multiple legal entities or profit centers need to attribute that revenue to certain buckets. That's the part that many people forget about. It's not just about how much to recognize on the consolidated financial statements, but also who gets what from a compliance standpoint, from a legal entity or who owns the IP. This is where intercompany transactions can become a big problem. But it's also a profit center standpoint and internal management of the business. The third is the accounting. And what I mean by this is the technical revenue account. This is not applicable to all companies. For some companies, simply getting the right amount and the right accounting period for RevRec is their challenge. But for companies with product offerings or go-to-market strategies that is sufficiently complex, where they need to decouple a bundle and record the revenue differently than how it was invoiced, this becomes very difficult to automate. In the prior accounting world, there were very stringent rules on how to do this. Sometimes you would hear them termed as VSOE or whatnot. But in some regards, ASC 606 simplifies things and provides a consistent framework. This is good. This provides further justification for automating the cycle, but operationally, it's still difficult to automate.
So we all know business models, pricing plans, customer offers, especially coming kind of through, hopefully, the end of this pandemic. Sales reps are going to want to have more flexibility in terms of what they can create and customize for customers. So there's going to be an increase in complexity. from a revenue scheduling point of view, do you see the best way to address this through a standalone tool, through a single platform? Should we be doing it through our financials package, through a subledger to the GL? What's the best way, in your experience, what's the best tool to address this?
That is a good question. While nobody wants a million different systems to manage, there are certain things you just can't settle on. When it comes to driving more revenue to the business, finance and the revenue accounting piece should never be the bottleneck to product innovation. This is something that keeps CFOs up at night. On the one hand, the CFO's job is to manage and the finance function is to provide support to the rest of the business in setting and managing budgets and funding the organization and providing the strategic direction. But on the other hand, they need to make sure their own house is in order. The second that new product comes off the line, is ready to ship, they need to be ready to account for that. In today's world, these offerings, with the flip of a switch, it can be ready for production. We can no longer live in that world where, in order to get ready, you need to submit a ticket to IT, and in 3 or 6 or 9 months, then you're ready to record that revenue. That just can't work. It just doesn't work anymore. And so because of that, I'm an advocate of having RevRec in an agile system. So this means, more often than not, the RevRec sits outside of the ERP or GL. And if you think about the different components of the GL, you have financial statement roll-ups, you have procurement cycles, and the expenses, fixed assets, and so on. Not much has changed with those cycles over time. Those systems generally work. But when it comes to the revenue cycles, much has changed, and they're constantly evolving as the product offerings are evolving and as the business is trying to stay ahead of the market. So this is a change. This makes a lot of controllers feel uncomfortable. The thought of doing RevRec outside of a GL, this can be a foreign concept. And that's why I'm quick to add, I'm not advocating for a different system for every single component in your quote to cash cycle. Nobody wants that. But billing and RevRec, they're very much intertwined. In my opinion, the ideal solution is an agile platform that can handle both, bring it all together in one solution, and then feed it off to the GL, feed the GL whatever it needs.
Got it. A lot of what you're describing, and at the root, is that automated RevRec is really a data challenge. And the essential data elements, price, quantity, payment terms, are contained within a quote. That data then gets copied into a contract. It then flows into, as you described, various transactional systems, systems of record. And then the data changes, right? The customer decides they want to increase or decrease the service level. Prepaid credits get reassigned, and on and on and on and on. And there are also the cases where it would be really helpful or useful to know the difference from a finance point of view, to know the difference between what are the potential bookings and recognizable revenue before the quote is generated, right? So rather than thinking of RevRec functionality in isolation, shouldn't revenue scheduling, attribution, and automation really be part of that broader platform?
Yeah, I think it should. I think you're right. This is the classic mistake where RevRec is an afterthought. It gets pushed to the bottom of the cycle. RevRec is what happens at the very end as an outcome to everything else. It's a classic mistake. You see that time and time again. If we invert that for a second, and if we start with the RevRec and then trickle it through, it brings the focus something that all organizations struggle with. And that's the bridge between RevRec, the actual amount of revenue recorded, and how the business is actually doing. In a perfect world, our US GAAP or IFRS financial statements would tell the whole story, but that never happens. And that's why you always have non-GAAP metrics, and increasingly more so now than ever, SaaS metrics in public filings. And those are just the public-facing numbers. But internally, every month, finance teams are pushing to describe what's happening in the business. And that ultimately starts and ends with data. These recurring business models are tied and are so intertangled with the customer that you have to know what's going on with the customer at all times in order to know the health of your business. Oftentimes, those data points, they sit outside of RevRec. If you think about a flat rate subscription with a usage component, the customer's usage may not hit overages until the second year. So for the entire first year, the revenue would indicate that the customer's health is good. Without data on the customer usage, you may miss the point that that customer is not using the product and is a churn risk. Or on the other hand, they're accelerating usage and they're ready for a mid-subscription upgrade. So I agree. The revenue schedules, at least they should be part of a broader monetization strategy. If companies can successfully do that, that's going to give CFOs and others what they need and set the foundation to not only automate the RevRec, but also give the complementary information that they need to manage the health of the business and make strategic decisions proactively.
Yeah, in a past life, you've seen a couple of very interesting examples. In one past life, you were at one of the very early backup as a service, as a service software companies. And you also worked on the finance team inside of an organization that was trying to sell based on outcomes, which brings its own set of challenges trying to align prepaid and postpaid models. But what you're just talking about is really the challenge of how do you coordinate between finance, product, and the sales team. How do you get that coordination to take place to be able to, as you said, invert the revenue recognition process to go from kind of an after the fact event to something that's, what we describe as revenue intelligence?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, and that's a good question. I think about that. The biggest challenge to operationalize, the biggest challenge around that is operationalizing two very different perspectives. On the one hand, you have the product team whose job it is to be creative and innovative. On the other hand, you have finance, which to some degree is the complete opposite. Creative accounting,
that's usually a recipe for disaster.
It's got a lot of people in trouble, right?
Right.
So and they need a strong control environment, and they need to keep track of compliance and budgets. So bringing these two different perspectives together can truly be a challenge. Sometimes finance and controllership teams are so accustomed to just saying no. The product teams, sometimes they don't take into consideration the downstream implications, and cahoots with sales creates a deviation from the product offering, every single deviation you can practically imagine. And next thing you know, you have thousands of lines in the product catalog of different variations that are really not all that different from each other. And I've seen it get to the point where customers aren't even paying for what they bought because things slip through the cracks in that environment. But it doesn't have to be this way. There are organizations that align, and they do bring the innovative attitude all the way through the organization. And in that case, that provides what's needed for these product teams and these finance teams. If the product team can keep in mind revenue recognition and bring controllership and bring the finance group up in the cycles, let them know what's going on and get their feedback. And if finance teams can keep that open, innovative attitude to say, we get it, we're going to make this work, and here's some parameters, that goes a long way to having things run really smoothly. And these two different teams can operate together and drive value to the organization.
Ultimately, there needs to be accountability. and ownership of it. And in driving organizational change, you've got to have someone leading the charge. Should that be the CFO or the chief accounting officer, someone from finance? Should that be someone from product? Should that be someone from sales? Who should lead that kind of organizational change?
That's a great question, and I really do think every organization is different. I do think the CFO has to be involved, right? Oftentimes the CFO is the glue that brings this all together. Sometimes IT, if you have IT involved, I don't think they're necessarily in charge or the ones that take ownership of the system. They can help be the glue that brings these different functions together. If they can do that in the right way, they can be extremely helpful. But at the end of the day, I've seen it in different areas where you have the product team involved, and even on the product team, there may be somebody with an accounting background. That can be helpful if it's needed in that situation. But at the very least, they all need to be aligned and respectful of each other. If the finance and accounting teams, if they own the systems, that oftentimes can be really good. And generally speaking, that's what I see most of the time.
So as a CFO, where do you see opportunities for innovation when it comes to revenue accounting, revenue recognition, finance? Where are the new greenfields here to really innovate?
You know, it truly is a greenfield. There is a few systems out there that have come about in, say, the past really just 5 to 10 years that have really been helpful. But we've still got a long way to go. And there is, as these new systems are rolled out, you're still faced with an environment that is so used to and accustomed to doing things in a certain way. So we can, there's people, processes, and systems, and we can talk about processes and systems all day long. But if you don't have the right people behind it, nothing will get done. And so if I think about really the systems are getting there. The systems are now in a state where they're not perfect, and there's some things that we have on our product roadmap and others do as well to stay ahead of the curve. But the biggest drag on corporations and enterprises in being able to effectively accomplish what we're going for here, in my opinion, quite frankly, is the people, or at least it can be. And so when I think about innovations around RevRec, I'd really like to challenge controllers and other financial professionals to think out of the box and think about what is going to be best for the business to survive in today's world. And these businesses, they have to be continually evolving. And you want to be on the forefront of that. You don't want to be somebody that's dragging things down and being slow. And, that means you might have to do things different and different than that they've done them in their entire careers. It might mean doing RevRec outside of the GL, like we talked about. So if CFOs can do that, and if they can take full ownership, do your research, understand the options that are out there, don't just take what system's been handed to them. That's where I think there could be a really big difference and a big shift in the market today to a more of an innovative solution around RevRec.
Great. Well, we are out of time, Brad, as they say. Thank you very much for your time. And with that, I know there's more information at the BillingPlatform booth. You're available for the Q&A later on, and certainly through chat. Your details are available. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Yeah, real pleasure. And thanks everyone for joining us. And with that, this concludes our session. Thank you.